Good morning. My name is Jen Bowser, Sustainability Engagement Manager in Resource Management and Planning, and Chair-elect of the Staff Association. On behalf of Human Resources and the Staff Association, I'd like to welcome you to Cabinet Conversations. Cabinet Conversations is a series of conversations with Cabinet members to get to know our leaders on a more personal level and to hear from them about important issues impacting our campus. This series was developed out of feedback from the Staff at Work survey, the engagement survey conducted by the Council of UC Staff Assemblies, also known as CUSA, and an Idea Wave campaign that was used in part to develop the Staff Association's strategic initiatives. Today we'll be speaking with Margaret Leinen, but before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. We have taken all the necessary precautions to prevent against Zoom bombing, but in the event that an incident should occur, we will immediately end the session and then reschedule it for when we can have the conversation at a later date. Questions were submitted during registration beforehand. If you would like to submit a question, please do so in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as we can today. And lastly, please check the chat for instructions on optimal viewing. Without further ado, let's get started. Good morning, Margaret. How are you today?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, feeling a little refreshed after the 3-day weekend. Ready to get going? Good, yeah. What did you do over the weekend?
Well, I did some cooking and had a very nice dinner Sunday night. And yesterday I went for a long walk along the Dieguito estuary. So it's part of the um, Coast Canyon walk that goes all the way from the coast up into the mountains. And I didn't go all the way to the mountains, but I had a lovely walk.
That does sound lovely.
Yeah.
What have you been doing during this socially distancing time? You've mentioned cooking and walking. Are those hobbies? Are there others?
They are. So cooking is something that I've always loved to do. And the lockdown or social distancing has really given me more time to do that. So rather than just fixing myself something, I've been really planning and, going to not going to the grocery store, but ordering from the grocery store and, planning out things that take a longer time to fix. And that's been a lot of fun. Walking is a big thing for me. I usually walk about 2 to 2.5 miles every day to keep sane. And um, I've been, not this past year, but I've been on walking vacations where you walk from one inn to another, and then somebody takes your luggage for you. You just walk with a backpack. And the last one I did in the Cotswolds in England, and I walked 107 miles that week.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, relaxed way of seeing things.
What's the first thing that you'll want to do when things get back to normal?
Visit my son in San Francisco and my sister in Florida.
Yeah, I think all of us are missing family and friends
Absolutely.
tremendously. Hopes that this can get resolved soon.
Yes.
Um, so you're the director of SIO, the VC of Marine Sciences, and the Dean of School of Marine Sciences. Are those three different jobs? Are you doing three different jobs?
There are three different aspects of this position. So um, the School of Marine Sciences is a division of UCSD, just like biology or Jacobs School of Engineering. And so it has a dean, and that's me. But unlike some of the other deans, we also have a lot of large facilities, like the four research vessels that we operate. We also have a campus at Point Loma. We have facilities out at Camp Elliott, and we operate a seismic research location that's near Anza, out in the mountains. So there are a lot of operational and logistical and uh, organizational duties that a normal dean wouldn't have. And so those, I'm vice chancellor for taking care of all of those. And then Scripps Oceanography is at the Scripps, the department is called SIO, and the and Scripps Institution of Oceanography is sort of a container that has it all. It has the department, it has the research activity, it has all of the ships, it has all of the remote locations and so forth.
Thank you. I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with how they intersect and about your role. So I think that's really helpful. Um, can you explain how SIO connects with the larger UC San Diego mission and vision?
Oh, of course, we are part of UC San Diego and have been since UC San Diego was started 60 years ago. So most people know that Scripps Institution of Oceanography existed before that. We were founded in 1903. And a former director of Scripps, Roger Ravel, was one of the people that was the strongest advocate for having a UC here in the San Diego region. And when it was formed, Scripps became a part of UC San Diego. Before that, we've always been part of the UC system, going right back to the beginning. But we were kind of like one of the national labs. We were a separate entity and not directly part of a university until UC San Diego was formed.
Hey. Can you tell us a little bit about the roles of staff at SIO? I think some people may be familiar that staff go out at sea. What other roles are staff playing at Scripps?
Well, we're a reflection of the university as a whole. So we have all of the normal kinds of staff that you have on main campus or general campus, as we call it. We have financial staff and business staff. We have staff for HR. We have staff for student affairs. We have, and then we have some different kinds of staff. The mariners who operate our ships are staff. And then there are all of the staff at Birch Aquarium. So Birch Aquarium is part of Scripps. It has 500,000 visitors a year. And so they have some very, some staff with really unusual responsibilities. So there are all of the animal husbandry staff, and they take care of all of the animals at Scripps. And then there are educators who operate our educational programs. So we have about 50,000 San Diego students every year that work with us. Some come to the aquarium, some we go to work with. And we have major programs in some of the areas that are least served in San Diego. And then in addition to that, we have people that make the exhibits. They actually design them and construct them. We have people that specialize in visitor experience, just like you would at the zoo or safari park. So all of those are all staff. And then, of course, there are all the technical staff that work for the scientists to make sure that their experiments and their labs are operating well. Many of those staff go to sea sometimes. And altogether, there are 2,000 people that come to work on the Scripps portion of the campus in pre-COVID times.
Wow, that's really helpful. Thank you for that description. I thought I knew a lot. I just learned way more. You're an award-winning oceanographer, and your research is focused on ocean sediments and their relationships to global biochemical cycles and the history of Earth's ocean and climate. Could you tell us a bit more about your personal interests and your professional background?
Sure. So I started out as a geologist, and I studied sedimentary rocks that form from sediments in water. And this was a long time ago, of course, and we didn't know a lot about the ocean and the deep ocean and how it formed. And so I thought, well, I'll go to oceanography and learn that, and then I'll come back to geology. But I never went back to a regular geology department. I always stayed in oceanography. So I have looked at how the organisms in the ocean affect the ocean. That's the biogeochemistry part. And many of them, the microscopic ones, make small shells for themselves. And those shells are made out of silica or calcium carbonate like chalk. And I studied their abundance and where they were, where they existed and how they interacted with the ocean. I looked at how wind has changed with time and the circulation of the atmosphere. And it's really changed dramatically. What we experience now is a very, very vigorous atmospheric circulation compared to what it was like, say, 3, 4, or 5 million years ago, when it was calmer and not as vigorous. So all of these things about the ocean that reflect our climate and reflect how the ocean interacts with the climate.
You had formed a nonprofit organization called the Climate Response Fund. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think a lot of people don't realize that even if we never put another molecule of CO2 into the atmosphere, we're not at equilibrium with the CO2 that we've already put in the atmosphere, and we're going to continue to warm. Again, even if we never put another molecule of CO2 into the atmosphere. So that, plus the fact that we still haven't even flattened emissions of greenhouse gases, no less turned them around, leads us to know that we're going to have very substantial climate impacts in the future. And a lot of people are, the people that are pessimistic in a good way, like looking at all of the possibilities for ways that things could go wrong, are looking at what to do if these impacts are not ones that we can really adjust to or live with. You know, what if they impact our agriculture and cause difficulties with farming? What if they affect water supply in a way that is, you know, a really terrible problem for the world? And so they've thought about ways that you could artificially um, adjust the climate by either putting things into the atmosphere that reflect sunlight away, so it keeps the atmosphere from warming, or removing the CO2 from the atmosphere. And these taken together are called climate engineering or geoengineering. And I got very concerned about the fact that a lot of this was being proposed without a framework for what was ethical and who would approve experiments, like not doing it, but even experiments. And I looked back to the time that we first started looking at recombinant DNA. And there was a very important conference at Silomar Conference Center on the coast of California. And the people interested in that field came together to talk about the ethics of it and laying the ground rules. So I formed a nonprofit to bring that same kind of conversation to the topic of climate engineering. And so we had a conference at Asilomar. One of the people that was involved in the recombinant DNA conference, Paul Burke, was a co-sponsor with us. And we included government agencies and nonprofits and advocacy organizations and scientists, not only from the US, but from abroad, and even some policymakers, some elected officials to talk about this and put out a sort of a set of guidelines and parameters that we should be thinking about. There have been some very small experiments, but not even really any experiments that would have any impact on local climate, no less the climate as a whole. But people are still talking about it.
Well, that's good. Working in sustainability, obviously, I'm interested in climate, and hearing you talk about that, it gives me hope. It is definitely challenging. On the same topic, you're on the executive planning group of the UN Decade of Ocean Science of Sustainable Development. And how does that work overlap with what you're doing at Scripps?
Oh, well, Scripps is what we do is really kind of the heart of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. The UN has sustainable development goals, and the sustainability in the oceans is one of those. And this is a decade-long effort to bring science to bear on sustainable development, certainly for the ocean, but there are a lot of other sustainable development goals that are related to this. And one of them is climate, and the ocean and climate are just completely intertwined. Another is adequate and clean drinking water. And the ocean, of course, is the source of precipitation, rainfall. And it is it plays a very important role in freshwater availability. So this is a way to really spend a decade looking at the ocean from the standpoint of what do we need to know to help people be more sustainable, to help governments be more sustainable.
Switching gears a little bit more, could you tell us about a particularly interesting project or research that's underway at SIO?
Yes, and I'm going to tell you about one that most people might not think of Scripps being involved with, and it has to do with wildfires and cameras in remote locations that allow CAL FIRE to direct their resources more appropriately. And this actually originated not from fire, not from climate, but from seismology, the study of earthquakes and tectonic activity. And remember that I said we have a seismology laboratory out near Anza. And of course, it's very far away and it has instruments that are recording all of this data. And we wanted to be able to get the data from that location back to Scripps easily. And the National Science Foundation gave us a grant to set up a high performance wireless communications network. And it's microwave communications. And so the instruments are connected to a little microwave transmitter and it's pointed up to the top of a mountain nearby. And there's a receiver there and a transmitter, and the data goes mountaintop to mountaintop back to Scripps. So we put cameras on the top of the mountains near these transmitters to deter vandals. And so we connected the cameras to the internet as well. And during 2003, when we had the wildfires, we could see the wildfires from the cameras. And we started talking to CAL FIRE about this, and we allowed them to access the data over the internet. And then we started putting up cameras that could be controlled. So they weren't just pointed down looking at the microwave array, but they could look out over the area. And you can pan, tilt, and zoom. And so this turned into a local San Diego network that allowed CAL FIRE here to access all of those cameras as wildfires emerged. Because the fires make their own weather. You know, the hot air rises and air comes in from the side. And many of them are in canyons and on hillsides. And so it's not just the weather there is not the same as the weather in downtown San Diego. So it's really important for the firefighters to be able to see what's going on there. So that has been so valuable that it's turned into a huge network for all of California. And we have now installed 600 wildfire cameras in locations all over California. That was funded by the state of California and also by the electric utilities. And of course, they're valuable for the wildfire cameras, but they're also really valuable as sites where we can put other instrumentation, like meteorological instrumentation. So they're turning into sites for us to monitor the environment as well as sites for CAL FIRE. And you would never expect that it was Scripps Institution of Oceanography that did that, but it emerged directly from our research.
I had heard about the project and I didn't know that it was Scripps. I would have thought it was an engineering department on campus.
Well, there's a partner of this that's with Qualcomm Institute that looks at modeling the fire and communications and use of all of that rich data. So Scripps portion is the cameras and the stations, and then Qualcomm Institute connects that to modeling capabilities.
That's neat. We work on an amazing campus.
We do, we really do.
The hydraulics lab, that's supposed to be reopening soon. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so the hydraulics lab is a big lab on the Scripps portion of the campus, but it doesn't look like a typical lab building with a lot of windows and laboratories and lots of rooms. It's really a big open space, and it has a very unique design, and the roof kind of has a wave-like form to it. So it's a very special building. And inside are the facilities for being able to replicate the conditions in the ocean inside in the laboratory. And not just a tank, like a round tank with the right temperature and the right salinity and everything, but being able to mimic waves in the ocean and the way that the wind interacts with the ocean to create breaking waves and bubbles and exchange with the atmosphere. And so for many years, there's been a long channel that's many, many feet long, tens of feet long, that has seawater in it and in which we do experiments. And we have a whole NSF-funded center devoted to this that's run by Professor Kimberly Prather. But it includes people from all over the country. And they do experiments related to air-sea exchange and aerosols. And she and others at Scripps, especially researcher Grant Dean and Dale Stokes, put together another large NSF proposal to make that laboratory channel even bigger, to make another one and have it be even bigger. So it's about 3 to 4 feet across and 3 to 4 feet high with water. And we can actually control the temperature as well. And it's all closed, so we can control the atmospheric composition over it. So we could do experiments with high CO2 or low CO2. We could do experiments with other pollutants in the water. We could even put oil in the water to see what happens. So it's a marvelous, marvelous experimental facility to join the smaller wave tank. And then it's in this remarkable building.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Yes.
And it has reopened, or when will it be?
Well, it's never closed, but there isn't as much work going on there now because this big facility is being constructed right in the middle of the building.
I see. And that's not COVID related. That's just
Right.
There's something. Okay. But speaking of COVID, how has it impacted the work being done at SIO?
Well, like the rest of the university, we're restricted to 25% density in laboratories. So the same number of people, but they just don't get to go to the lab as often. And so that has certainly affected the pace of research, but most people are able to still do some of their research. It's just that the pace is much smaller or slower. Then for teaching, the same as the rest of the university, almost all of our classes are taught remotely. And we have a few classes that are taught on the general campus that are being taught in person, just as other departments do. What really interesting part is the ships. So nobody wants to board a ship, take off, and go someplace that would take a week to get back from and then contract COVID. So we worked very closely with UC San Diego Health to design a protocol for testing both the people that operate the ships and the scientists who go on the ships. And we were one of the first universities in the country to be able to return to sea. During the shutdown last spring, all of the research vessels around the country were shut down from operating. We were able to start again in the summer, and so now people quarantine, the crew and the scientists quarantine before getting on the ship. They're tested multiple times, and so everybody that gets on the ship is negative. And then we take them directly from a hotel room where they're quarantined to the ship, no stops in between, and then they stay on the ship. They can get off at the dock, but they can't go anywhere. They have to stay right there. And then when they go to sea, they all have to wear masks for several more days. And then after we're absolutely sure there's no COVID, then they can take off their masks, because it's very difficult to be working on deck with a lot of big equipment, and many operations require that people work together to recover nets full of fish or recover samplers and so forth. So one of our ships, the Roger Revelle, is actually in Antarctic waters right now. And they just tweeted a couple days ago as the International Space Station went over them. And at that point, they were closer to the space station than anyone else on Earth. And our other ship, the Sally Ride, is also in the Pacific, in the Western Pacific, doing research.
Good to know that that can continue even during this time. And the protocols sound amazing, that they're really worked out well.
Yes, absolutely.
In what ways is SIO operations looking to reduce carbon emissions, or in general, your carbon footprint?
Well, again, we are part of UCSD. So we're partners with UCSD in reducing the amount of fossil fuel that we use to generate electricity. So we're very fortunate in this area that SDG&E has a very substantial renewable component to our electricity generation. One of the highest around. And so we, at UCSD, we participate in that. We are now all but one building gets its electricity from the UCSD system. We had one that had to be connected to SDG&E. So as UCSD works to reduce our use of fossil fuel, that helps us. Then the second thing is transportation. And so we're really looking forward to the trolley and working with transportation to really up the connector between the trolley and the Scripps campus, because that's one of our biggest challenges, getting from the Scripps portion of the campus to general campus to teach classes, to attend meetings, to work with research colleagues, et cetera. So trolley, we hope, is going to decrease single passenger commuting. And then there's remote work. And actually, Hallie Nicholson, who's on the behind the scenes on this presentation, and Bryce Besser and I are on a campus-wide committee called Reimagining the Workplace. And we're trying to look at ways that we can provide more flexibility to staff after COVID, and trying to figure out what the new normal is after COVID. Clearly, the staff want to do more remote work. That doesn't mean that everybody wants to stay home 100% of the time. Some people do, but they're looking for more flexible schedules and more remote work. And that too can really help us with commuting. So we're looking into what that would mean, how it would work, how you do that when there are so many diverse kinds of jobs, the difference between somebody advising students and somebody on a ship, or the difference between somebody that does financial work and spends most of their time working from the computer anyway, and somebody that does landscaping. So it's a complicated issue, and it's a big challenge, but it's a great group, and we're having some wonderful conversations about what the future will look like. And I think all of that feeds into the issue of sustainability. Then there are just some of the normal things like banning plastic. So we don't allow single-use plastic containers to be sold on food service on our portion of the campus. And our events people don't use single-use plastic as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely during COVID, what we're seeing a decrease in is the emissions from transportation, from commuting back and forth. And you mentioned the connection between the light rail and your campus. There's that hill that provides beautiful views, but is a challenge to get up and down.
Absolutely.
And between Birch and SIO, arguably one of the coolest or the coolest locations on campus. And for those who haven't been down to either, how could staff take tours? How do they get around to see that part of the campus?
So once we get back to the new normal, we'll have tours again, and we do public tours once a month, and you can sign up for those. They're in the you can sign up on the website for Scripps, and we have staff that come on them as well as members of the public, and you actually get to go out on the Scripps Pier, which is normally closed off because there are a lot of experiments going on the pier, and it's a working pier. And behind the scenes, our experimental aquarium, which is separate from Birch Aquarium, and some of the interesting buildings and facilities on the campus.
That's fantastic. We'll have to look forward to that. Last week, Women in STEM was recognized with the Inclusive Excellence Award for SIO. Could you tell us more about this group and about other diversity inclusion efforts that are specific to Scripps?
Right, it's actually women and minorities in in STEM, and
Okay.
it's a group that formed itself. It has faculty, students, and staff, and it advocates for conditions for women and for minorities, and it holds a lot of programming, and they're a big resource for our executive director for equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, Kiara Bazan. And she has been recognized as well, and does an amazing job. And so it's both an operational group for her. She can reach out to them and they can help with events and help be the committee that pulls together events, as well as an advisory group to talk about different diversity initiatives that we have, as well as a communication group. So they've just been fantastic, and they do projects that are in the San Diego community as well as on the Scripps campus. Just a huge diversity of activities.
How do you think that we can build community and stay connected in the environment with a large population of, well, in this environment of being remote, with a large population of staff working remotely and many working on site, having that we're in two different places but disconnected?
Well, I think that the COVID has given us a new sense of how we can use the tools that are there. It's like this Zoom cabinet conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it wasn't just because there was Zoom that you did it. It came out of a sense of wanting to be more connected. But I don't think we'll go back to a situation where we don't have opportunities like this. And so many people keep telling me, oh, I don't, even people that work entirely on general campus, it's like, oh, I don't have to spend 15 minutes walking from my office to somebody else's office for a meeting and back, where I've spent a whole half hour just doing that. I can just Zoom to the meeting. And I know that we're all tired of not seeing each other in person, but learning how we can use this tool to bring us together in good ways, and how to use it when some of us are in person and some of us may be working remotely, are going to be challenges. But I think that we're going to have more ways to be closer. And another thing is that I think that being separate really taught us how important it is to be closer and how important it is to know each other in a personal way. So, the first thing you asked me was what I've been doing during COVID for myself. And that's, I think that was a big lesson that all of us all over the country have learned. And hopefully we won't unlearn it when we can just see each other in person.
Looking forward to that day.
Yes.
I do agree with you, though. I think back at Zoom of being a conference tool that we would use in place of conference calls, and most times, at least when I was using it for UC-wide committee calls, I wouldn't turn my video on because I saw it as just being something in place of the telephone.
Mhm.
And now it will open up more opportunities for us to be connected when we're apart, even when we're together. So hopefully we can start to have more integration when we're on campus of people who aren't on campus can be part of meetings that maybe they wouldn't have been able to before.
Yeah.
While we were talking, we got a question that came in saying, is SIO looking into scientists and staff doing less travel to meetings and conferences and research cruises to be a good example and lessen their carbon footprint, especially now that it's been done due to COVID?
Right. Let me set aside cruises and ship work from other kinds of travel. And I'll talk about ships and cruises first. One of the things that we are leading the country in is the use of remote vehicles. So we have all kinds of little vehicles that some look like a torpedo, some look like sort of an undersea glider, some look like a surfboard, and they're all powered either by wave energy or by battery power. And they are able to go out and make measurements in the ocean without being connected by any kind of a wire or connection to the ship. And this is a huge development in oceanography, and it's driving a lot of oceanography toward being able to get data remotely. For example, one program that Scripps developed the float, the vehicle for, is called Argo, and there are now 4,000 Argo floats all over the ocean, all over the world. And every 5 days, they send back a profile of the upper 6,000 feet of the ocean and its temperature, salinity, et cetera, back to Scripps, and it's shared internationally. So that's a lot of cruise time that we don't use. But we still need to go out to sea to do other kinds of experiments where you need to use very heavy equipment or equipment that doesn't work on these vehicles. So we're still doing that, but the amount of oceanography that is ship dependent is decreasing. So now let's talk about people and travel. I think that COVID has really changed, I won't just say scientists, academics' view of what's appropriate in terms of travel. And I would say that I can't imagine us traveling across the country to go to a 10-person committee, 2-day committee activity with the same frequency that we did before. I just think that people are going to say, let's just do it by Zoom. Other things like in-person meetings, I think will also have a lot more remote capability, but you can still see the difference that's there when 1,000 scientists get together and can have those informal conversations and talk about what they're doing one-on-one. I've been to a lot of remote conferences where we've spent a lot of money to try to create that, and it's not the real thing. So I still think we'll have big scientific meetings. I think people will edit their travel more, but I think a lot of the smaller meetings that we used to fly around for will now be remote.
So we're almost at time. I want to end with a really fun question that we got, which is, what is your favorite cupcake flavor?
My favorite cupcake flavor. Oh boy, about 4 or 5 months ago, a committee that I was on that had to do a huge job over several months finished, and I brought them all cupcakes and champagne to their houses to celebrate, so we could have a Zoom to celebrate. And the cupcake flavor that I kept for myself was tres leches inside and chocolate frosting.
That sounds delicious.
Yes.
And now I'm hungry.
And unfortunately, no cupcakes in the house, or maybe fortunately.
But champagne.
I always have champagne in the refrigerator. You never know when you have to celebrate.
Right.
That is the truth. I always have champagne in the refrigerator.
Same here. I agree. Well, thank you so much, VC Leinen. I really appreciate your time today, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Jen, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it very much. And thank you for all you do for UCSD with sustainable development.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I hope you have a wonderful day and a fantastic short week due to the holiday yesterday. Tune in
Thanks,
next time.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.